Good morning. Good morning. It's Wednesday and it is grief talk time. My name is Jennifer Tom
And I'm Darlene Rample.
and we are excited because it's a new month and we just finished February. I just can't
Wow.
like time is just moving.
Mm-hmm.
However, I have to say that I learned something really amazing in February. And my biggest takeaway was to have a heart with ears. That means listening more. If we listen more with the heart with ears, it's actually a way to show love. Who knew? Dolly, do you want to talk more about that? Because
Mm-hmm.
that was so amazing for me, especially February being the month of love.
Yeah, we just talked about how to be present and how to listen without interrupting, without judging or analyzing, but just actually be present and listening. And that's the best gift you can give to somebody is to listen to them, to hear what they're saying, and to acknowledge what they're feeling and that you've heard what they've said. It's amazing. A gift of love you can give to somebody.
Gift of love. It's a heart with ears. So it's a new month, and we are having a new theme, and
Mhm.
this is my favorite because I'm living it, I'm experiencing it, I'm feeling it, and that's called the art of communication.
Mhm.
The art of communication. Am I saying it right?
You did the second time.
Art,
Art.
art. Darlene said, what's our theme
The
this
art
month?
of communication.
I love it. I love it. And when we
Hmm.
were deciding about this theme for March, the art of communication, it came to us that conflicts show up when you're
Hmm.
communicating. How many
Hmm.
of us have conflict in their lives? Is it just me? As I said, that
Hmm.
Grief Talk is a place where we share lessons learned through life and loss.
Hmm.
And I have to tell you, this year I've had nothing but conflict. So conflict shows up in all areas of our lives
Hmm.
and places we may not think about. Oh my goodness. Like places we may think not even think about. My biggest one was conflict of self. Anyway, I'll let Darlene tell us
Hmm.
about when we were sharing, we talked about 5 areas of conflict.
Hmm.
I did not know there was 5 areas of conflict. I just knew there's conflict in the world, and how do we show up and
Hmm.
have master the way we communicate during conflict. So I'll let you, Darlene, talk to us about
Yeah.
the.
So the first thing is just actually recognizing what are the areas of conflict. And like Jen says, sometimes we don't always think about it, but often our conflict is with ourselves. It's about how we're feeling, how we sometimes fight ourselves, what we're thinking about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, how we see ourselves. We can all be in conflict with ourselves. The second area of conflict is relationship. This is where we usually think about conflict with our spouse, with our children, with our friends, with our family. There's always tension, conflict when two people get together because we're all unique, we're all different, and we all have different opinions and perspectives. And so when we come together, of course, there's going to be conflict there. The other area of conflict is society, just what's going on in the world, politics, our culture. We can be in conflict with our culture when things change and we don't, our beliefs don't fit with those changes. So we can have conflict with our culture. We can have conflict with nature, the snowstorms, the cold weather. Those all can be a conflict that are causing stress in our lives as we try to navigate nature and our lives. And the last one is spiritual. We can have conflict with our God. We can have conflict with just the spiritual, kind of our spiritual selves, and who we believe in and what we believe in. So there can be conflict in there. So most of the times, our conflict will fit into one of those five categories.
That is so good, Darlene. Thank you
Mhm.
so much for sharing that. Because as again, we all know that conflict will show up in some time in our lives.
Mhm.
And we might not even think about it. And then there's conflict right in front of you. So please remember, we are all going to experience conflict
Mhm.
at some time of our life. And it almost sounds like grief. It almost sounds like what we talk about, losses. Like, you know how we say there will be more than 40 types of losses during our lifetime? So how many times, I don't have any research done, but can you imagine how many conflicts we've had? I've had conflicts all my life. And now more conflict is coming, even though it catches you on the blind side. So please, if you have some friends out there who would like to hear about how to have a conversation about conflict or how to master communication, this is the month for you. And we are going to find guests who have mastered how to communicate. Because I have to say, I am struggling. Because every time you have conflict, it's like, where am I going wrong? So this is huge for us. It's huge for me personally that I need to master, I need to learn. Because remember, every day here at Grief Talk, we share lessons learned. We are learning. You're learning. Please, would love to hear how you deal with it. So our biggest nugget that we want to share, that we've learned today, that we're going to share today, is about checking ourselves before we have a conflict conversation. Seriously, I had no idea we needed to check ourselves before we enter into a conflict conversation. I just thought, let's go. And that's how I get in trouble again and again and again. However, because of this open conversation we are having today, I learned that before entering into a conflict conversation, we need to check ourselves. And I want to say thank you to Mel Abraham. He's part of Growth Day and part of Brandon's team. He's the one who shared this. And I thought, oh my goodness, I just learned this and I need to share it with my people. And you all who are watching are my people. So let's go. We've got 4 points. Before entering into any conflict conversation, we need to check our attitude. Who knew that? I didn't care about my attitude. I just went on head on. So what does that mean? It should be an attitude of responsibility versus blame. Most times when we enter into a conflict conversation, we go in with an attitude of, hello, it's me, like you know what you did. However, we need to enter into that, check our attitude, and be responsible. Own how you're gonna respond to the conflict conversation. What do you think, Darlene?
Yeah, I think we often get into conflict with other people because we are in conflict with ourselves. And so when we check ourselves first, check why, first of all, why we want to have this resolution, like what is the problem? Is it my problem or is it the other person's problem? And also just how do I think I loved your responsibility versus blame. We often go in going, I'm right and I'm going to prove I'm right. And that's not a win-win situation. When you have a conflict, you want a win-win situation. And when you come in blaming, or when you come in having to be right, you usually don't have a win-win situation.
I love that. So again, let's check our attitude, and also taking the responsibility of how you choose to respond.
That's huge.
Right? Taking responsibility on how you choose to respond. So from now on, if I enter into a conflict conversation with anyone, I'm going to check in with myself and check what's my attitude. Am I taking responsibility on how I'm choosing to respond, or am I going to blame? And I have to share with you, I want to learn how to be responsible and choose how I'm going to respond. That was huge. And no blame. Okay, let's go number 2. What's the motivation? My motivation is to prove that you are wrong. There is no, we cannot resolve anything when you come with a motivation to prove something. So it should be one of the resolution versus righteousness. I love that.
Yeah.
It's not about I'm righteous and you are not, but it's about how can we approach this conversation with an intention of resolution.
Yeah.
Oh my
Resolution.
goodness, I'm growing. I'm telling you, 2023, I'm growing every day.
Mhm.
I love that so much, Darlene.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts?
Well, definitely our motivation is a huge factor. Like, what do we want out of the conversation? And this takes like honesty. We talk a lot about in our grief recovery about being emotionally honest.
Mhm.
Again, what your motivation is when you enter a conflict, that's you need to really be honest and figure out what is your motivation. And is it that you want to be right? Is it that you want to change that person? Or is it that you want to find a solution to what's going on?
I love that. And I, it's not easy.
No, it's not.
That's why this surprised me that before you enter a conflict conversation, you have to check yourself. I'm like, really? However, just learning
Mhm.
about it, it makes so much sense.
Mhm.
And the third one is perspective. Is look at what are the lessons learned. This is a conflict. What are we going to learn
Mhm.
so that we can move forward? Most times we get stuck because we don't extract the lessons.
Mhm.
Hence, we don't move forward. We just
Or we keep repeating.
we keep repeating, and I'm good at that too. Right?
Have you ever had that conversation? And it's like, how many times do we have to have this conversation?
I feel sometimes we repeat because we feel not heard,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what even last
Mhm.
month was about. If
Hearing.
you're not hearing me,
Yeah.
I will repeat until you hear me.
And that actually has to do with a lot with grief. The reason that we're usually in conflict is because we're feeling like we're not heard. We're feeling like we don't have a voice. And then we get stuck and then we can't get out of it because we have not had that completion, that being able to voice what we need to say.
I love it so much. And just remember, February, our month theme was love. And one way to show love is to be heard, like when you feel heard. And yeah, thanks for that reminder. And the last one is the tact. Like, let's focus, look at, I don't want to get it wrong. So I wrote it down. Focus on the behavior that needs changing and not the person. Like when we personalize it, it doesn't go anywhere. We don't resolve anything. However, if it's a behavior that needs changing, then that works better. So,
because you can't change a person, right?
really,
Really. But behavior is what we're responsible for, right? Is our behavior. And it also then takes attack off the person when it's a behavior, when it's a behavior that has to change, or a behavior that you're addressing, not the person.
I love that so much. And you know, I tell my kids, I share with my kids all the time. It's not you. However, I don't like the behavior. And to just be clear, like the difference. It's not attacking the person, it's about the behavior. So this was my biggest lesson for this as we start this month with to master the art of communication. I thought this conflict, entering into a conflict conversation, to check in with ourselves was huge for me, was huge personally, because as I said, I'm human and I do have conflict with, and most times it's conflict with ourselves, as Darlene said, conflict with the relationships, conflict with the world. We think the world should be like this, but it's going this way. And so all these conflicts, so how do we enter into those conflict conversations? First, we need to check ourselves, and we have shared today, we need to check 4 things: our attitude, our motivation, our perspective, and the tact. What are we focusing on? I feel that has helped me greatly. I'm going to practice this month. That's a challenge for everyone to practice this, to practice, to check in with ourselves before we have. And seriously, I don't mean that everybody has conflict. If you don't have conflict in your life, like that is amazing. However, if it ever occurs and you find yourself
in conflict,
that you need to have a conflict conversation, please just master those 4 before entering into that conversation. So I love what we do here because remember, it's all about sharing lessons learned through life and loss. And now we want to just circle it to
Mhm.
grief, right?
Mhm.
Even though we don't like that word very much,
Mhm.
it's all connected.
Mhm.
And Dali, just take us through that connection of what we just talked about and
Mhm.
grief.
So a lot of times when we're in conflict or when we're anxious about, a lot of times it's that emotional energy. So something has happened, some our expectations haven't been met. Or what we expected to happen didn't happen. How a person is not how we saw them or we expected them to believe. So all those things are losses, and that loss creates emotional energy, and emotional energy is what charge, and we need to release it. So we often then will release it by having conflict with somebody. We see it in our kids all the time, right? They're going through something, they don't know what to do, so they act out and they have a fight with their sister or their sibling, right? They'll cause conflict, and again, that's because they have all this emotional energy that they don't know what to do with. And so how we explain it in grief and loss is that all that emotional energy needs to be released and needs to be dealt with in a good way, and using the right tools. So how do we turn something that's emotional energy? What tools do we need to help us work through that emotional loss, all that emotional energy? How do we, and then how do we do a constructive? How do we go through, and how do we complete that loss? How do we say the things we need to say, to help ourselves feel complete enough that we can let it go? And so that's what our course is, our grief recovery method group, which we're starting next week. On March 7th. It's an amazing program that brings people together with all kinds of losses and brings us together, and we get to share and we get to learn the right tools, so that we can process that loss without having a whole bunch of emotional conflicts in our life. But yeah, one way, and again, that goes back to the motivation. Like, what's our motivation between our conflict? And often our motivation is grief. We're mad, we're angry, we have all these emotions about things that we've lost that we don't know how to deal with.
Oh, I love that so much. So if you're in our area, please check out our website. We have all the details. Sign up, join us. Thank you so much for all the ones who've signed up. We are so looking forward. It's gonna be an 8-week program, and oh my goodness, every time we teach, every time we share our what we've learned, I learn something new. I am learning, and that's why I love Grief Talk here, because it's all about lessons learned, and we are so intentional to keep growing, to keep learning, so that we can share with you. I love when they say sharing is caring. So check out our website. Please share, because remember, sharing is caring. Share with others, and stay tuned. And until next week, we will continue with our theme, the art of communication. So until then, keep sharing our information, and if DM us, send us a message, check out our website. We just want to stay connected. Until then, see ya.
See ya.